40 years ago, when I started in ministry, Mother's Day was a slam dunk. You could talk about mom and motherhood and everything, and pretty much 90% of the congregation, 95, they were right with you. The mothers would bring their families, husbands who might not come to church would show up on Mother's Day, and the kids would come from all over the place, and they'd fill the pews, and that's my end. First, I'll kill Plan A. Anyway, it was one of those, really kind of an easy thing to do and everything, but today, Mother's Day is really a tough one. Because motherhood and the idea of motherhood has become so diverse. You've got the moms who are happily married and their kids are either there or there's good communication with the kids and no tension other than the normal stuff that everybody kind of goes through. So Mother's Day is a real big deal. There's taking out to dinner, there's flowers, there's gifts, taking it easy and all that kind of stuff. But for a lot of moms, boy, this is a tough day. The single mom who has to work and there's nobody going to give her a flower. She doesn't get a card on Mother's Day. And she just hopes that the person taking care of the kids doesn't get sick. So she loses a day at work and loses the income. For some folks, Mother's Day is tough because their mom has died. Or mom is gone. Or mom was never there. Even though sometimes she may have been there, and when she was, it was not a good scene. And so they don't have the Hallmark card of motherhood to remember. Tough day. But it's also a good day because it's a day when we can give thanks for our moms, to remember moms, but also to look beyond and to think about God's plan for motherhood, for the mother figure in our lives. The scripture tells us that God had a plan. God never did anything without a plan. God never put anything on the face of the earth without a plan. And so the plan of motherhood is something that no matter what kind of a relationship we have or had with our mothers or mother figures, we can look above that and see what God has to say about it. And there we can find some courage, we can find some hope, we can find some direction, and we can find some assurance, and we can find a reason to rejoice in the Lord on this day. When Mother's Day started, late 1800s, by Anna Jarvis, and who knows where the town in West Virginia, where it started? Where was it?
Grafton, West Virginia.
That's right, and you are from where?
Grafton, West Virginia.
We've got two people who came all the way from Grafton, West Virginia to be with us today. Isn't that great? So if I don't get the story right, just wait until after the service and tell me, okay? I can't stand any more changes or anything going wrong. I've had my limit. No. Anyway, Anna Jarvis wanted to honor her mom, and the idea spread. And a lot of states began to adopt, this idea of Mother's Day. And in 1914, Woodrow Wilson, the president, said, second Sunday in May will be Mother's Day, which is great. It was especially great for people who make cards and sell flowers and candies and all kinds of stuff. And suddenly Mother's Day was another Christmas day, which did help the economy, but it just drove Anna Jarvis nuts that it became so commercialized. And she really felt to the end of her life, it lost the meaning that she had intended, simply to honor mothers. I want to tell you a story about a woman, had a couple of kids. She was married, and there were some good times in the marriage and some not so good times. But she was very active in her church. She loved God and did the very best she could to live that out. And as she was involved in church, she worked in the nursery, she worked in Sunday school, helping out with the kindergarten kids, and when the little children lined up for the little children's choir day, she'd help corral them and herd them into the sanctuary and stuff. And whenever there were cupcakes to be made or cookies, she always showed up with a couple dozen. And over the years, as her role kind of grew and her kids were in Sunday school, they asked her to be a Sunday school superintendent, which was kind of a cool thing for her. And the church, where the Sunday school was kind of living in two worlds. There was the world of those who had wealth and were well-to-do, and they owned the businesses. That the other half, where they worked for these folks, and they were at the lower end of the economic scale, and some really in poverty. And so she would on Sunday morning drive around the neighborhood, and that was way back before all the auto safety things. But she would pack her car full of kids and bring them to Sunday school and then take them all home. And she discovered that some of the kids wouldn't come to Sunday school because they didn't have any good shoes to wear, and the other children would make fun of them. If you've ever been on the receiving end of that, that's a pretty tough thing. And so she worked out a little deal with the shoe guy in town, buy shoes for those kids or discount or whatever, make sure they had shoes. But she also made a deal with the Sunday school. She said, if you'll come, whatever you've got to wear, just wear it. And when you come to Sunday school, I will be in my bedroom slippers. And I'll be in Sunday school with the bedroom slippers. So she'd dress up to the T's, nines, whatever you call it, Sunday morning. High heels, get to Sunday school, take her high heels off, reach in her bag, pull out these raggedy old slippers, and shuffle around. And there were some folks who kind of raised their eyes a little bit, but the kids came. It's kind of neat. Sunday school sort of starts to fall down, deteriorate physically, and they decide to build a new one. They ask her to chair the building committee, get it built. She does it. They build a brand new facility, a plaque on the wall with her name and all this kind of stuff. Things are going pretty good. Then a new preacher comes. And the new preacher said, well, you smoke, and that's a bad influence on the kids, so you can't be superintendent anymore. Now, let me ask you this. If you were that woman, how would you feel? Angry? Hurt? Crushed? Livid? What would you do? Quit church? Leave church? Go somewhere else? Stop going to church? Get up a campaign to get the minister thrown out? Burn up the telephone lines? What would you do if you were her husband? Other than throttle the guy, probably mad, probably quit, probably send your money somewhere else. What would you do if that was your mom and you were a part of that Sunday school? Well, I'm going to tell you what this lady did. This lady essentially said, okay. And she stepped down. And she would come on Sunday. If they needed some help somewhere, she jumped right in. She still stayed connected with the women's group. And one of the things that, even though pastors make a lot of real dumb mistakes, they don't mess with the women's group. But every Sunday she was in worship, and her kids were in worship with her. And that made a very profound impact on those kids, because it taught those kids that when you sign on in the church, you're not just signing on to a building or a job or a plaque on the wall. You're signing on about your relationship with the Lord. And that it's really all about Jesus. And yeah, it hurts. Yeah, it's sad. But you're there for the Lord. And she kept on going. And that made a profound impact on the lives of her children. I buried my mother out of that church where she had been the superintendent. And if she had not responded to that with the witness that she had, I can tell you I probably would not have stood in a Methodist pulpit for the last 40 years. I may not have even been in church the last 40 years. But it was the power of her witness, and her motto was always take the high road and hold your head up high. Had she not had that witness, I have no clue where I would be today. But I can tell you this, in my 40 years of ministry, I am really careful when it comes to people changing jobs. Someone said that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. And when that was written, it was usually the mom or a mother figure who was rocking the cradle. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. It's really amazing the influence that a mother or a mother figure has in our lives. When I was growing up, I had my mother, my grandmother, and I had about 9 other women, most of them widows in the neighborhood, that were surrogate mothers. And I'd make the rounds all week long at dinner time where I wanted to eat. It was like having a restaurant, with an unlimited gift card. And Saturday was cookie day, I'm telling you. But if there was ever something that needed to be corrected, they didn't call and say, Virginia, Billy's done something, can I discipline him? No, they would call and say, Billy did something and this is how I dealt with it. And Mom said, send him on home. Phase 2. But then there's about a half a dozen Sunday school teachers, half a dozen school teachers, and they all gave me a piece. Just as those mother and mother figures in your lives have given you a piece of good stuff. Yeah, there's bad stuff there too. There are hard memories. But there's a lot of good stuff that we carry with us. And you see that goes all the way back in Scripture as Paul is writing to 2 Timothy. He says, I am reminded of your sincere faith, of faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and then in your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you. For this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God, the faith he got from his grandmother and mother, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. Now, Paul was reminding Timothy of where his faith came from because Timothy was having some struggles. He was having some struggles because he was so young. But he was a young person who was filled with the fire of God and the passion of Christ. And we all know what happens when the young people really get turned on to the Lord. It's real exciting to see them up here, but when they start making decisions and doing things, it gets a little edgy. It can get a little edgy, and it was for Timothy. But Paul took him back to his mom and his grandma. You see, one of the key things here is that almost every generation, we tend to blow off what the generation before us has done. We kind of look back and wonder, what were they thinking? What were they doing? And our grandkids are going to say, what were they smoking or inhaling or taking when they did this or said that? And we blow it off. I did it as a teenager. It's like the story about the guy who said, when I was 18 years old, I thought my parents were the dumbest people on the face of the earth. When I turned 20, I could not get over how much they learned in 2 years. You see, Timothy was being connected with his heritage. He was being connected with his heritage in the faith. And Paul even begins by talking about the faith of my ancestors. He was connecting with that heritage of faith, that stream, that line that comes down through the centuries of God working in and through the lives of people who touch our lives. Everybody in here today has been touched by at least one person, and through that person, God has touched your life and helped shape your faith to what it is today. And Paul was reminding Timothy that his faith, his relationship with God, his work for God, was far greater and far more than just what was going on in his life at that particular time. That his faith was an eternal faith. It was a faith given by God. It was a faith given from one mother to another mother to Timothy. And that is a faith that made Timothy a powerhouse. Because his mother and his grandma were like prisms. And the light of God shone through that prism. And a prism scatters light. It's a rainbow. And put the rainbow of God's grace in Timothy's life. Now, to be clear, Timothy had to make a decision. He had to do something about the gift. See, it's not like Christmas morning. You got all the gifts under the tree, and you sit there and say, oh, I wonder what's in that real big gift with my name on it. And you sit there all morning looking at the pretty wrapping and bow. You're tearing into that thing like a hungry person because you want to see what the gift is. And that's the way it is with faith. It comes down, handed to us in so many ways, but particularly today we remember one of the ways it comes to us is through our mothers and those mother figures. And even if our biological mother really wasn't there, was not a woman of faith, there are other women of faith, even sitting around you today in this sanctuary, who are giving you that gift, who are reminding you of that gift, who open their mouths and talk about what God has done in their lives. And you've watched them go through a hell of emotion, a hell of crisis, a hell of disaster, and they hold their heads high, and they come back into church on Sunday morning, and they sing God's praises, and you look at them, and you wonder, how could they do that? You're receiving the gift, just like Timothy did. Every woman in this place has a calling of God and an opportunity to have that mothering quality and make a difference in somebody's life. And that's part of God's grace. That's part of God's grace working in us today. For every woman in here, God has so much to do through you. And even if your kids are grown and gone, even if there's an estrangement, even if your child has died and you can't talk to them anymore, there are still lives who need to see God's light through the prism of your life. They need to see God's grace. And that is one incredible calling that every woman has in this place today. To be a Lois, to be a Eunice, and to give the gift of faith to somebody named Timothy. Be it a boy named Timothy, and I couldn't think of a girl's variation, but y'all know what I mean.